evening. My name is Sarah Borgnis-Tobin, and I'm joined by some folks tonight who are going to share with you some wonderful information about cultural humility, which is what we're all here tonight to learn about. And this program is presented in collaboration by the Henry Carter Hall Library and the Clinton PTA. I'm joined by Clinton PTA Vice President Abby Roccapriore. Hi, Abby.
Hi.
And our guest speaker for tonight is Elijah Manning of Inclusive Education LLC. Hi, Elijah.
Hello, Sarah.
Thanks for joining us again. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in. I want to let you know that for this portion of the program, your camera will be off. We invite you to use the chat feature during the program to share any questions or comments that you have. We'll circle back to those. And at the end of the program, we'll use the raise hand feature for some questions and comments and feedback. We really want to hear what you have to say. So just sit tight, and we are so pleased that you could join us this evening. So also before we get started, there was an email that was sent out with some videos. If you didn't have a chance to watch those before the program tonight, that's okay. We'll resend them afterwards. You can always watch them later. And we'll just go ahead and get started whenever you're ready, Elijah.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much, Sarah and Abby, for having me here again. I appreciate the effort you go to put these on. So I appreciate all the work you put in as well. Thank you, everybody, for who is either viewing or listening, depending upon if you were able to figure out how to see me or if you can just hear me. Nonetheless, I appreciate you being here. As Sarah mentioned, there will be time for us to actually have conversation. I'm gonna do some talking at you for a little while. I'm hoping it's more to you than just at, so that by the time I decide that's done, we'll have an actual conversation back and forth. And, you know, throughout the course of the event, if you would like to put things in the chat, feel free to go ahead and do that continuously. I'm going to do my best to keep my eye on it. If I don't see it for some reason, hopefully Sarah and Abby will give me a gentle nudge to let me know if I don't see it. So feel free to put anything in there that you need to. If we do end up being able to see everybody with cameras, you can always use the raise your hand feature as well, so you don't have to just put it all in there. I know I'm just reiterating, but I like to make sure everybody knows that I want to hear from everybody, and I don't want you just to think I'm doing all the talking here. So I want to make sure everybody truly understands that. So thank you again. All right, so some of you were able to hopefully watch the videos on cultural humility. Some of you maybe didn't get an opportunity to, and that's all right. At the end, if you did and there's things you would like to talk about in those videos, we will absolutely take time and discuss those. You know, give me your ideas, your thoughts. I'll tell you what I thought, and we'll just have a nice little back and forth about those. If that's not where you want to go, if it's just asking questions, feel free to just do that as well. Or if there's other comments or just thoughts in general, it doesn't have to be anything specific to the videos. There can be something that I talk about that you want to, you know, get more information on, or just there are things that in every day that you may have had a question on and you don't know how to ask that question, and hopefully this will be an open space for you to be able to ask that question. Okay, so I encourage that from everybody. So what exactly is cultural humility? Well, the definition states cultural humility, a process of reflection and lifelong inquiry, involves self-awareness of personal and cultural biases, as well as awareness and sensitivities to significant cultural issues of others. Core to the process of cultural humility is the researcher's deliberate reflection of her or his values and biases. All right. That definition comes from Cultural Humility, Essential Foundation for Clinical Researchers. So a lot of this, well, that specifically is by Catherine A. Yeager, PhD, and Susan Bauer as well. So I'm going to talk also about Melanie Trevelyan, and I always mispronounce her name. I think that's the correct pronunciation, but I may be incorrect on that. And Jan Murray Garcia, they're the ones who really dove into the research on what cultural humility is. So there are some key differences right off the top between cultural humility and cultural competence. All right. And they lay those out for us. So, right off the top, I'm going to see if I can share my screen so that you can take a look. Well, if you could allow me, if it's possible. If not, that's okay. I'll just read them.
Sure thing. Let me take a look at my settings here.
Yeah, no worries.
Apologies.
That's all right. I didn't tell you I was going to need that. That's my fault. I just sprung that one on you.
Keeping me on my toes.
I'm doing my best.
While we're waiting, if anybody wants to use the chat feature to let us know who you are and where you're from and how you heard about the program.
Yes, thank you, Abby. That would be great. Okay, Elijah, do you have that option now?
I do. There we go. I am sharing my screen. Okay, so right here is what the two ladies I just mentioned, not the Trevelyan, the Jaeger. These are the two differences when they talk about cultural competence versus cultural humility. All right. So as you can see right off the top, it's a view of culture through group traits and cultural competence versus unique to individuals. All right. So those are some key things that I'm going to be going through for us as we continue. As you see, group labels, associates group with a list of traditional traits and practices versus humility, which originates from multiple contributions from different sources. So each one of these, just shows you the difference between the idea of it being a group, and a lot of cultural competence is just about on a mass scale of the people, but not always are traditions and anything in that nature always blanket. Sometimes there are differences based off of where the individual comes from and the way their tradition has changed or whatever that case may be. So as you see, ongoing life process, which is a big one I'll talk about in just a moment. But if you can see the website right on top. If you're interested in checking that out, they have this whole study that they did, which is incredibly important. And I would suggest everybody go in and read that. Some of it is a bit wordy and scientific and things, but it's worth the read if you can get through it. Take some time. It doesn't have to be all read at once. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that for now. Just wanted to quick point that out for everybody, because there's a lot of information that I just went through with everybody, and it seems like it probably is a little overwhelming. So I'm going to break it down for you in simple ways, and using the original ideas we saw in the videos, if you saw them, and if not, then these will be new to you at the moment, but go in and check out those videos from Melanie Trevelyan, and these, I should have put Dr. Melanie Trevelyan and Dr. Jan Murray Garcia. And I will break down the three components that they told us about. So first one is self-reflection and lifelong learning. All right. So we have to start with that first part, self-reflection. How do we self-reflect? How do we use self-reflection to propel us forward? All right. Self-reflection is taking a look at who you are, where you grew up, who you interact with, who you have interacted with, and how you continue to be involved with people that are different than you. All right. These are specific to cultural humility, of course. The first step is actually one of the most difficult portions of this conversation. Because in order to move to the next part, which is the lifelong learning part of this, you have to be completely honest. Asking yourself this question is a great way to start, but it's not the only aspect of it. You have to ask yourself these other questions. So some of these questions are questions that have crossed me, and I don't say crossed as in made me angry, because they don't always make me angry. I say crossed me as in these have been asked to me or of me. So I'm framing them from a perspective that you will be able to look at. For instance, have I ever asked to touch a Black person's hair? Have I used the phrase, I have Black friends? Have I ever wondered how a person with an ethnic sounding name can get a job? Or have I not interviewed them because of their name? Those aren't the only questions. Those are just a few other important questions that can really be asked. So if you were with me last time, we talked about implicit bias. So a lot of the steps in implicit bias are that need for the self-reflection in order to get through those steps. So what happens now is, as you are working through all of your implicit bias, these are the types of questions that will allow you to really get into what you think and have acted upon, while at the same time, it's not, you weren't doing it to cause someone harm or to humiliate anyone. Okay, again, that's part of the implicit bias work, but that's only half of the self-reflection work. The other part is the idea that if you have studied a culture, for instance, if you're an anthropologist or a police officer, and the work you have done suggests that Black people commit more crime than white people, what you've not taken into account in this is the circumstances in which that statement may have been true. For instance, you're seeing that in a more predominantly Black community, there may be higher Black on Black crime. We've all heard that. But when you look at white on white crime, that is equal in the white communities. So those are implicit bias, and there's a disconnect in there when we study it as an entire group instead of breaking it down to individuals. And of course, there's further studying our, what's leading up to this, like what are the other causes, because part of the stat is missing. That part is the relationship that the community has with over-policing, for instance. There's a study by Danica Gordon, published by the Cambridge University Press. And what she does is she really dives into some of the causes of policing inequities in economics, housing and zoning. And as she says, racial acts, white flight, and urban renewal. All right. She told this to Tufts University. And the effects of over-policing within a city. So some of this, white flight and urban renewal, gentrification is an urban renewal form, and white flight, what happens a lot of times, so I'll put it in the sense of Ruby Bridges. So Ruby Bridges was the first to integrate in schools. I had heard a conversation with her probably 3 months ago-ish, and she was talking about the same school in which she attended for the first time that was being integrated. And now that same school, which she was the first Black person to attend, is predominantly Black. White flight. The white people have left that area, and it has become a predominantly Black community in there. They didn't want to have the integration, so little by little, they continue to move out of there. All right, so that's the white flight aspect. And then the urban renewal I talked about is gentrification, which we see happening all over the place. It's oftentimes, if you look at aspects of gentrification where it's people with more money, and predominantly it ends up being white people who will come into an area and buy up the property and rebuild it as a better, and oftentimes it becomes too expensive for the Black and brown folks who were there in those communities for a longer time. They end up moving out or being pushed to a even smaller area because they can't afford to live in those new areas that are being built up. All right. So there's also, like I said, the effects of over-policing within cities as well. And this is a small sample size and may not be duplicated in all cities, but we have seen and are becoming more aware of these types of scenarios. All of that is said to have you understand this. Because you have heard a cultural stereotype does not make it always true for an individual. I am light-skinned. I don't talk in a stereotypical Black guy style. I don't have an ethnic sounding name. But all of that doesn't mean you know me as a person. That means maybe I don't fit into your mold of what a Black male usually is. But is that on me or is that on you? So when you say lifelong learning, it is the constant reminder that because you may think something about a specific ethnicity or a culture and how they can teach you who they are as individuals and who their people are in totality. You have to engage in listening and conversing, asking questions from a place of sincerity and with humility, and admitting you don't know something, but are willing to listen and learn from the people themselves. So that's at the end of this, we're going to have time to have you ask questions or engage in conversation, because that is true cultural humility, getting to know each other in ways that we don't always do. And we love small talk, but we also hate small talk because it's just, hey, how's it going? Cool, good to see you. Amazing weather we're having, right? And you feel like you've had a little bit of a conversation, and you have, but you really haven't had the opportunity to engage with somebody. All right. I'll talk more about my own needs for engagement and the ways that some people try to engage with me. But we're going to move into part 2 now. So, part 2, recognize and challenge power imbalances. All right. So a lot of the work that they talk about is attributed to situations in the medical field and based off of patient and clinician. But that's not the only type of power imbalance, all right? So they tell the story of how a nurse and a doctor were working with a patient, and the patient was Latinx, and the pain medication didn't need to be prescribed by the doctor because the doctor was viewing it through, oh, they don't feel pain the same way and all this. And that is, they're not only their implicit bias, but that is their group mentality, but that is also the power struggle from a clinician patient view. The clinician is the one with the power in this case, and the patient has none. The patient is the one who needs the help, but if the clinician doesn't recognize, then they're not going to offer the help that is necessary. All right. Again, those aren't the only types of power imbalances. There are many power imbalances within communities. For example, oftentimes those that are economically struggling are less heard than those with affluence. Those with money more often hold more power over where communities invest their money and which types of people benefit most from those investments. All right, so that again goes to the gentrification. It goes into, and I don't want to talk politics because this is not a political discussion or conversation. The only reason I'm mentioning even that word is the fact that, the politicians are the legislators, and we know that there is lobbying, and more often than not, money is what gets you to be a lobbyist. And more often than not, the Black and brown communities don't have as much money to even be able to lobby. And that's not just a wide presidential type, but it's also even within local communities. There can still be those same power imbalances because not all of the people who don't have the money are going to be invited to the table to share. I mean, I know there's community moments where people have, but a lot of influence is also made in a closed off room. There's actually a wonderful analogy because this creates a constant cycle that people continue to feel like they are unheard. And this analogy is by famous rapper Tupac. All right. And his analogy goes like this. And he talks about being on the outside of a hotel room, and every day he knocks on the door. And every day they open the door. And what he sees inside is an amazing party that's going on. And there's, an overwhelming amount of food. But every day they close the door on him without sharing any of the food or letting him or any of the people that are outside in. All right. So then he goes into, they want to get in. So, a song suddenly comes and they break out with like, please let us in, we want some food. But the door never opens, or when it does open, they're never let in, rather. They still don't get it. So then 2 weeks, the song changes to, we are hungry, we want some food. It starts to become a little more aggressive. And then after 3 to 4 weeks, it's, give us some food or we're breaking down the door. After, months or years, that's when things change. And that's when people look for ways to get in there without knocking. And that's sometimes when things can become a tipping point where there is possible, protesting, for instance, and things of that nature. So he finishes it by saying, we've been asking for years, since the civil rights, since before that. And at the time of this quote he's talking about, it's the 90s. It was after Rodney King. But today, we're in 2021, and still that same question is being asked. So I'm gonna put a list of names out for you. Some of them you may have heard, some of them not as much. Gordon, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Emmett Till, Toni Morrison, Malcolm X, Ruby Bridges, Martin Luther King Jr., Rodney King, Ibrahim X. Kendi, Angie Thomas, Michelle Alexander, George Floyd. All of these names have either talked about power imbalances, were the subject of power imbalances, or in some cases, they were both. Power imbalances. Who has the majority of power in your community? Your state, your country? The video talks about laws that were created to uphold and even make stronger those power imbalances. It specifically talks about immigration laws from 2010. The question, again, I know I mentioned politics, but it's not about politics. It's really comes down to humanity and morality. All right? So those are what we need to remember to focus on. When we talk politics, we sometimes broaden it or narrow it, I should say, to a specific, right versus left, and we believe what we believe type thing. But there should be a discussion amongst you and somebody who disagrees with you, finding a commonality on humanity and morality. I'll talk more again about those types of things in a moment. So next is institutional accountability. Now, what is that exactly? I'm going to go through a list of things. Why did the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 19th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, and most recently, the Anti-Asian Hate Crime Bill all have to pass? So some of those you may know right off the top. The 13th is the abolishing of slavery. 14th defines what it means to be a citizen of the United States and also protects civil rights. 15th is the right to vote. 19th gave women the right to vote. Civil Rights Act, we know what that one is. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one with Matthew Shepard. Yeah, that happened in 1998. The bill didn't get passed until, I want to say, 2010-ish. So a lot of time in between that. And then just recently, like I said, the Anti-Asian Hate Crime Bill. So why did all of those have to pass? They all had to pass because of the recognition of power imbalances and those that are less heard than others. These all came because of the recognition and the challenging of power imbalances. These all came from years of fighting the systems that were put in place originally, which means that the institutions were not originally designed for everybody. So they had to be challenged. Many fought for years, and many lost their lives. So when we talk about how institutional accountability can be, that's what we mean. How can the systems that are in place be set up so it's more equitable and just for all of us, not for one in particular, but for all of us, because we all have the right to, you know, pursue happiness and all of that, right? But we've had such differences, and a lot of this is because we don't listen to one another. And the systems have been put in place to not have to listen until it comes to a tipping point time. So, what does all of this mean? It's about culture and not race. That is who makes us who we are. What is culture? So there's this wonderful piece, and I'm going to share again. Here we go. This one, I don't know if anybody has ever seen this, heard of this. A History, the Construction of Race and Racism, Dismantling Racism Project. It is a wonderful piece, but it talks about how race is a construct, and it's really culture and ethnicity, and as you see, nationality. Those are the important pieces, because race is just a term. See, it says here, race is a false classification of people that is not based on any real or accurate biological or scientific truth. In other words, the distinction we make between races has nothing to do with scientific truth. There's no science behind a race. There's science behind cultures and ethnicity, but not race. It says race is a political construction. A political construction is something created by people that is not natural development, is constructed or created for a political purpose. The concept of race was created as a classification of human beings with the purpose of giving power to white people and to legitimize the dominance of white people over non-white people. If you study this from an anthropological point of view, you can literally go through history and you can see how the structure was put in place at specific times in not just American culture, but the culture of the world, and with colonization and things of that nature. So if you are aware of colonization, that'll be, what I'm talking about. If you were not, I would recommend looking into that. So this piece right here, I'm not going to read it all. Don't worry, it's 14 pages. I'm not going to do that to all of you, but I would highly recommend that everybody, if you can find this, it's Western States Construction of Race. Go through it, read it. You will learn something. It is incredibly informative, and it will give you a better understanding of cultural humility, because you will actually start seeing more than just the race. You'll start to understand more about how culture is truly what plays a part for us. So because of that, for many individuals and groups, their culture can be traced back for generations and across countries. Many have also had to leave a country and weren't able to learn all parts of their culture and are forever trying to understand where they came from and what that means. For a specific group, African Americans, that can only research back to sometimes just the 1800s, when they were finally starting to be counted as people. So their culture is probably very different from their actual ancestors, but they may not be able to find that true ancestral culture, because there's no link, there's no bridge that they are able to cross. So if you have, your history is rooted in Scotland specifically, you can trace back some lineage and learn a little bit more about how the traditions are in Scotland. And if you enjoy bringing that to your everyday life now, it's probably a little bit easier for somebody who is African American from here, who can only research back to 1800s, and then it stops, and they don't know their culture past that. They don't know, they don't have a point. So that is when their culture started as an African American. And of course, we know that cultural dynamics change over time, and there can still be traditions that are in place from centuries ago. It could be a style of a wedding, the way a meal is prepared, the way worship is practiced, the way music is played. Myself, I have been researching my own family history, and I can't find information prior to the 1860s. I'm not even sure that I've been following all the right paths. It gets a little convoluted. I listen to stories from my aunts and from what my father used to know, and I try to put those pieces together, but I'm not sure I'm following all the right pieces. And mi- other people have those same, issues. I'm not saying I'm the only one, but it is difficult to truly find. Culture itself comes from individuals and communities and religions and countries and so on. What we have is a collection of differences that need to be explored and discussed by each other, by actually getting to know each other. It doesn't mean you have to remove your culture and assimilate to another's. It means that learning will only enrich your understanding of who other people are. So in the video, there's a young lady who, I forget the question, but she answers in her native Spanish. And she answers saying part of being happy with the way she's accepted in cultural humility is the fact that she feels free to answer in that native language and be accepted. And it is our responsibility to not say to them, speak English, you're in America. It's our responsibility to find a way to bridge that gap, even if it means just picking up a little bit of a language, just learning a couple key phrases or just some words that you can kind of understand, or asking. You're like, oh, well, that sounded interesting. What did you say? You can make it where it doesn't have to be this discussion of like, whoa, that was another language I don't understand. But instead, you can ingratiate yourself to allowing that conversation to be open and honest and be like, oh, I didn't understand, but I want to know, what did you say? Sometimes it may not work, and some people may not know how to respond to that when you are open and honest with them, and that's their own need for cultural humility work as well. And that's okay, because they have had to put up a barrier, and now you're going to help to be able to break that barrier down and allow them to have those moments where they can feel a little comfortable through the uncomfortability, getting to see that you are accepting of who they are as a person as well. Again, this comes down to humanity and morality. I myself have spent years trying to distinguish what my culture is and who I am. For as far back as I can remember, new people that meet me have one question for me: where are you from? Do I take offense to this question? I can. I don't. Why? Because I choose to believe that the person asking is coming from a place of wanting to get to know me. I don't speak how they think I should, or look the way they think I should, or act, or anything. I am unique to their perspective. So they either want to see if they were right in where they thought, or they just simply can't figure it out. I usually ask them what they think, and they guess all over the place. They have no idea, and it becomes this country or that country. And it was a challenge for me for years, because I didn't look a type of way. I looked like whatever they wanted to see in me. But now I don't care. My uniqueness is my strength. I don't want to fit into their box, and I welcome them getting to know me. There's a piece that I want to point out that I didn't construct in here. And part of our learning, there's a thing called adultification. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with that concept. But it is about how Black and brown children, and oftentimes specifically Black girls, are seen as older, more mature, knowing more about mature things than they should. And that starts at the age of 5. There's been a study by the Georgetown Law Review. They did a whole study on it, and it's people see them as knowing more about sex or knowing more about drugs or violence just because they're dark skinned, and it leads to a lot of inequities in their learning, and they have a higher suspension rate, a higher expulsion rate, and they oftentimes will get the police called on them while in school and things of that nature. But I only bring that up because as we're looking at cultural humility, I want to point out that sometimes it starts for people as young as 5, that we don't actually get to know them or why they behave in a certain way, why they think. Instead, we put that onto them. And that is not fair, specifically to 5-year-olds, because they're just trying to be kids, just like anybody else, any other kids. But when we start instantly looking at them different at that age, it just becomes worse and worse. And as we're talking about the need for more conversation and more getting to know one another, I just wanted to point that out because that is a big thing. And I want people to understand what adultification is. So I'm going to wrap up my whole spiel, but I'm going to read you a poem I wrote. It's called I Matter. Part of it gets a little difficult to hear, but it's important. I am your equal. I am a shade darker. I am a shade lighter. I am in the middle. I am both places at once. I exist between 2 worlds, but I don't exist in either. I am not white enough for you. I am not black enough for you. I am neither black nor white at the same time, but I'm also black and white at once. I speak to both sides and they both hear me, but one side listens while the other side thinks. I speak to both sides, then they switch it up. One side listens while the other side thinks. I believe in the existence where my worlds meet with both of yours and where you see me as a bridge for all, but I'll never get there if you don't stop looking at me as the other. I am me. The hue of my melanin is lighter than yours, but the hue of my melanin is darker than yours. I am surrounded by the idea of joining a side or picking a part of me that fights or runs. But if we were on the plantation, I would be in the field. Maybe I'd make a trip in the house, but I am no equal to the master's legitimate children. No, I'm a bastard that maybe has ties to the master. But I could be the son of the overseer or the son of the carpenter that raped my mother. I am not the house brother. Without a face that justifies my existence, I am not different. I do not matter to some. To the man carrying a gun that points it at my mother and says she needs to spread for him, or the master that pretends she will have a special place but won't bring her inside because she is a disgrace. Who am I exactly? Who listens to me? Who decides where I should be and who decides that I should be free? I am the same as those in the fields, but today, you look at me and see what exactly? I'm not too scary because I'm light black, you see. I'm not the same as some because I'm light black, I'm free. But wherever I go, the road traveled is the middle. What I choose to see, but the world sees a riddle. It sees a man with a curl in his hair and a skin that is caramel. So I'm asked, where are you from? The answer, America. And that is why we all need a little more cultural humility. All right. I am done talking at everybody. Now, of course, we will open it up to anybody who would like to speak, like to say anything, share thoughts. I will, if you're doing only comments, I will happily read them, and so we can share with everybody.
Elijah, thank you so much for sharing your poem with us tonight and for sharing all of that information. And we're also wrapping up National Poetry Month, so it's very fitting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that poem is a collection of so many thoughts that I've had for so long about who I am and how the world sees me. So it is both challenging and exciting at the same time to read and to have lived, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And powerful to listen to and to hear read aloud. So thank you again.
You're welcome. And sure, Sarah, we can have that. Did everybody fill it out?
So I didn't. I can share if you want to do our survey quiz that you put together for us. I can share it in the chat, and maybe people can submit that while we're chatting about some comments.
Absolutely. While you're sharing, I'll go through some of the comments. All right. You're welcome for sharing the poem. Thank you for listening. That's said by several other people who said great things about the poem. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I'm glad you enjoyed the poem. There's Linda McCall says there are two books that resonate with this: The Water Dancer and On Golden Mountain. So that is important. Miss Gina Maurizio, hope I'm saying that correctly. You're welcome for sharing. And for all the others who I didn't mention names, you're welcome for sharing. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate that. And as you see, the link above is going to go to a survey that we can all take a moment and fill out. It'll be really quickly. And then after we've all kind of gone and taken that, I will bring it up and we can all look. And so you don't have to worry, it's anonymous. Nobody's name is going to be attached to it. So be as honest as you absolutely can be, because you won't be called out. There's no way for any of us to know who filled out what answer. It is really just so that we can all look at information together collectively and see that you may not be alone in thinking some of the things you think. And to me, that is very important and powerful, because sometimes we feel isolated by the thoughts we have, thinking I got to do better, or like, why do I have these thoughts? And it's okay. It's okay. We all have these types of thoughts, and I don't want you to beat yourself up over it. I want you to take time and know that you're not alone, and that's what we're here for, to work through those inner monologues and dialogues that we have with ourselves, and know that we all do it, and we're working together through it as a group, as a unit, as a country, as a world. That we all have to do this.
That's such a great point, Elijah. And I think, what we're doing here tonight is trying to create a space for a dynamic discussion, sharing, learning, sometimes clumsy conversations, or people maybe asking questions that they're not sure about, maybe they've never asked before, and whether or not we have the answers, there's value in asking and just showing up. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
and it makes me think of also one of the quotes that I wrote down from one of the videos that we shared. There's a woman being interviewed, and it struck me when she said, "I mistook not knowing for lack of intelligence."
Yeah.
She said, "I just didn't know." And I thought that was powerful.
Yeah.
Any feedback on that point in the video?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the old ignorance is bliss type thing, we all have, I like to call them those blind spots as well, where there's information that doesn't always reach us. And it's not because we don't want it to, it's just because it hasn't connected with us for whatever reason. But acknowledgement is so important of that. And when you can simply say, wow, I didn't know, I missed something, and I wasn't doing it maliciously, I was doing it because I was just blind in that moment. And that's just what happens. But that's where we are, and we're working through. Sarah, there's a quick thing in here I'm gonna mention. Ms. Kelly Edwards says, so as a person is working through their biases, if they are honest, how do we create a space that is safe enough for them to be really honest? And that is a wonderful, wonderful question. And so there's I'm having a couple thoughts at once. Give me a second.
That's very typical of you. I love it.
It really is. I have like 6 different thoughts, and I have to connect them all to the same thought pattern. So I will mention the word ally. Yeah. All right. So hold on to that word for a second, and then I'll get back to it. So when we are having these types of conversations, thank you for holding it, Sarah. Well, when we're having these types of conversations, the best place to start having them is within our peer groups, okay? Whether that means it's just you and your friends, you and your family, you and maybe some other professionals. And it's going to start getting uncomfortable. And that's when you know you are in the right spot, because you are having that moment where you may be looking at your peers and you may be like, this is getting a little bit cringeworthy. Should we go there? Yes, you should. Because now you are starting to open up a conversation with each other. And why I said hold on to ally is because when you want to say that you're an ally, it doesn't mean just going to a protest. It doesn't mean putting on Facebook Black Lives Matter. It doesn't mean stop Asian hate. What it means is that you are starting to have those conversations where I can't have those conversations. Okay? So it's up to you to start those with your peers, with your other professionals. And then when you get to a point where you guys are not as uncomfortable, and gals are not as uncomfortable with the conversations because now you've started to chip away, then you can start bringing in outside people like myself. Exactly, Sarah. So it can expand and you can reach the next people, and you will have more people who can come in and share their own, I want to say issues, but that's not the word. I can't think of a word I want to use, but their own trepidations and their own problematic ways of looking sometimes, and they will be able to start sharing them, because they will understand that this space has now been created safe enough where you are joining them, knowing where they have come from and where they're heading. So
I was going to say, can't biases be inherited culturally as well?
absolutely, 100%. If you have it in your house, you have it in your family. And where did that come from? It was probably learned behavior that was passed down for generations. And oftentimes, if you live in a bubble, I hate to say it that way, but everybody lives in their own version of a bubble. And if your bubble has never expanded beyond your home community or whatever that case may be, you haven't exposed yourself enough to a different culture. And then within that bubble, you may think those different cultures are not for you. But if you haven't even ventured out and had a trip to it, to just even see, to look at it, to smell it, feel it, taste it, whatever the case may be, then it's always going to be other and different. And that's okay that it's other and different, because it should be, but that doesn't mean you can't find a path to joining it in ways that allow you to at least partake in whatever experience that can bring in that culture to you. So we just have to keep expanding our bubbles, if you will.
Elijah, there's a comment and a question from Veronica Voorhees that says, I've noticed that TV commercials seem to intentionally depict multiracial, multi-ethnic families and friendships. This seems good, and it must be profitable to show this. Do you have any responses to this?
Yes, that is something that advertising companies have had to work on very strongly. I always bring up one particular ad, and it is the Heineken Light Ad. And some of you may have heard me talk about this one before. When Heineken Light first came out, they did a commercial that was at a rooftop bar. It was this beautiful scene, music, dancing, and people in Heineken Light. Somebody orders one, bartender opens a Heineken Light, puts it on the bar, passes it down. It passes a black lady. It passes a black man with the playing guitar. It passes another black person or something, and then it's picked up by a white lady or at least a very light-skinned person, and it says sometimes lighter is better. Yeah, so when you talk about ads needing to depict multiracial families and multi-ethnic families and friendships, that is very good, because oftentimes our perceptions are so influenced by the advertisements we see, and we don't even recognize it because it's so subtle, like in that commercial. If you just saw that commercial without proper context around it, I'm sorry, it's outside my house. I don't know if you can hear that at the moment. There's without that proper context around it, you may not be looking and notice that you are subtly being influenced that lighter is better. But you are. It's a subtle influence. They are everywhere. And as they attempt to readjust their campaigns to include more everybody, that is only great for us as everybody to see, because now we can see ourselves or see a friend or see somebody else that, oh, wow, that culture looked different. That culture looked interesting. So how can you learn more about it? Let's start looking in the chat again. The challenge in the survey questions is that I want to give the answers that aligns with my thinking and values. The reality is that I have not overcome my subconscious bias, and I initially responded without thinking. My reactions do not align with who I am trying to be. Lauren, absolutely. That's why it is implicit bias. That's why it is a subconscious thing within our own minds that we don't want to be a mean person, somebody who stereotypes people. We don't want to be that. But our initial reaction sometimes is to have that. And that's okay, because it happens to all of us. You know, it's that old cliche, if you're in an elevator with a black man, you hold your purse a little tighter. Like, maybe you didn't mean it to be. Maybe it's just that he's a man. Maybe it's just that you are in a confined space and you're trying to take up as little space as possible. Maybe there's other things in there, but that's okay, because when you acknowledge what the reasoning is behind it and that you do want to do better, you will start to do better, because you will start to recognize that you are not doing what you want to be doing, and you have to retrain your brain. And as I talk about with a lot of these advertisements, they have trained us. And as Abby was talking about, you know, it's a cultural changes that we need to make sometimes as well, that can so influence us so heavily without us even realizing, that we just have to start to open ourselves up to that information. Linda has Harvard has an online implicit bias study that you can take to help you discover your implicit bias. It's pretty fun and interesting to take it. And she even gave the link. Thank you, Linda. I do want to say one thing about that test. It is a wonderful test to start to recognize your implicit bias. There is only one issue with the test, and it's the fact that sometimes when you know you're going to take that test in particular, it changes your answers. You become more aware. And they've done some studies on that one and noticed that people, even they take it at separate times and their answers may be totally different. And it's about a mindset. It's a great starting point, and I will encourage everybody to go on and look at it. Just be aware that your mindset may be different if you took it another time. So if you take it the first time and you're like, oh, this is not me, this is terrible, it's okay. Maybe there was something going on with you in that moment that led that, or it could be the opposite. And there could be another time where you're having a little more implicit bias creeping into your subconscious. And that's okay too. That's okay too.
Elijah, I wanted to direct a question to you. Partially my own doing and partially from another gentleman that had posted that. I lost it now. I'm very sorry. But how do you introduce cultural humility, not only like in your own home, but in your community as a whole? And my focus is always on education. So, you know, what are the easiest and simplest ways to include cultural humility in your school? I know, you know, talking about it sharing in non-COVID times, food and, you know, traditions. What about community?
Yeah, so that, as Sarah brought it up, and that's Dennis's question. And yes, I see, and I will address as best as possible. And a lot of it goes to, as we are as we are looking to do more and more of this work, in particular within our own individual groups or with our own school systems, there are a lot more school systems that are starting to have like groups that are starting to, be their own diversity, equity, and inclusion groups that are having these types of conversations. So that is a great way to start in like a school setting. Start with being like, hey, we're gonna start this. There we go. Morgan School has one. We're gonna start with this little group because we see these individuals as being able to be mature enough to start having these conversations with each other, to start breaking through. And when I talked about, how people address me with, oh, where are you from? I took that as my opportunity to teach them cultural humility. Instead of them coming at it necessarily from a place of cultural humility, I took that as my responsibility to kind of bring that to them, to their understanding, to shine a light in a different way and make them have to understand what their question is and why they're asking. Are they asking because they're like truly interested, or because they want to put me in a box? And I know I give them the opportunity to try to figure out which one it is, and then we'll have a conversation on it. So it's a little bit harder to bring it out into people, but like I was saying, I had mentioned about, like, say you're with somebody who, speaks a language that's different than yours, and you ask a question, and they perhaps are having difficulty, answering, and they answer some in their native language. That's again a great moment for you to just help bridge that gap by not getting frustrated with them because they didn't answer the way you wanted them to, but saying, what native language is that? Oh, could you translate for me? I'd love to know more about what you're saying. Just little pieces of information that you can extract from other people are the ways. If you hear somebody listening to a song, oh, who's that? Like, just enjoy it a little bit with them. Be like, oh, what's this one? I usually listen to your favorite artist, whatever the case may be. Do you know that artist? Who do you listen to? Oh, I don't know them. Or books, oh, I see you're reading such a book. What's that one? I don't know that one. Whatever kind of little ways that you can start learning about somebody, that's a great way to start. And I mean, some of it may be a little bit more difficult as you're trying to cross the culture. So start with somebody who looks like you, and how do you engage them? And then once you start to develop your ways of being able to engage people in these types of conversations in general, even if they look like you, then you'll start to be able to understand that, oh, I can engage anybody in a conversation coming from an honest and open place. So that's how I typically try to go into these in a one-on-one interaction. And like I said, if you're not comfortable yet doing the culture divide, then start with somebody who looks like you, and you can open up a conversation in a different way.
Elijah, I think there's a lot of power in what I'm hearing you say in being curious, and going back to that quote from the video of the woman saying, "I didn't know," and just how powerful it can be to tell someone else and to share with them, and that have that vulnerable moment of saying, "I didn't know. I don't know what that means. Can you share it with me?"
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. Absolutely. I'm going to read Dylan's comment. I think that public schools should be required to teach courses on diversity, power imbalance, and cultural humility. If not, they need to enforce these concepts into the history or health classes more so. Dylan, yes, 100%. So some of the other work I'm doing, Dylan, is attempting to get a more open and full view of schooling, and I'm pushing for more BIPOC teaching, more LGBTQ, more women's studies, and BIPOC, I'm sure we all know the word, but just to make sure Black, Indigenous, person of color, to make sure that we get a broad perspective on everybody, so it's not limited to much. So right now we have a very sanitized and colonized version, which we teach in schools, and we need to open that up to a more diverse education where we talk about some of those names I listed. Like I said, the name Gordon. I don't know if anybody even knows who Gordon is. I'm not judging you. I just don't know if anybody knows who Gordon is. Gordon is an escaped slave. He is very famous. He has pictures where he has the whips all over his back. So if you've seen that famous picture of a black man with like the really scarred and torn up back, that's Gordon. He went on to be to fight in the Civil War and things. So there's a name we don't really know. You know, for instance, there's Harriet Tubman. We only know Harriet Tubman, Underground Railroad. Do we know Harriet Tubman went on to do so many more amazing things? But we don't talk about that. We don't learn about that in school. We just learn that, yeah, she was on the Underground Railroad, and that's it. But that's not it. That is not it at all. There's so much more. Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, and the list goes on. And that's only from the Black perspective. But there are so many others. Like, you know, we learn when we learn about women's voting rights, we don't really talk a lot about Elizabeth Cady Stanton. We just don't. But she was just as instrumental in it. So that's what I'm hoping to have be. So I'm actually working with Old Saybrook School right now, and I'm doing with the high school, and I'm doing some anti-racism and racism awareness teaching. And as we're continuing this, we're moving into also starting to look at it through a historical context lens up to the present. So connecting past works by, you know, Frederick Douglass and other writers, all the way up to writers of today, but also through music and how the music has changed, like through Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday to, you know, Marvin Gaye, to music we have now, like, you know, from Tupac and then others as well. So just the teaching of that in a more full picture, that it shows the cultural differences, but it also shows how things have changed and how we don't really look at it from that type of perspective.
Elijah, Lynn had also asked about, you know, has the syllabus changed? And I think you kind of answered that question in a sense. You know, it's work that you are doing. It's work that students are pushing for. Do you have any feedback to that specific question?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Because anthropologically, you're not wrong. They're not wrong by looking at it in a group, okay? And it is important context, because unfortunately, it's hard to look back at the individuals as much. We can do it, and there are ways to do it, and that's what I'm trying to push forward into. But when you're looking at just through the anthropology lens, you're looking at cultures en masse. So, you know, that's where all the social sciences have to meet. That's where it has to meet. Anthropology has to meet sociology, has to meet psychology. They have to come into one so that you can study the group, you know, study the group behaviors, study how that connects to the individuals through psychology and how that goes back and forth. So as the good thing about science, whatever science it is, it always leads to more question. So I think that as they continue to learn and adjust, they will continue to learn and adjust and ask the right questions. And if not, I will be there pushing them to learn and adjust to asking the right questions.
I was going to say that, you know, in coming up with this topic tonight, my husband works as a consultant for housing and urban development, specifically with people experiencing homelessness. And all the work that he's a part of is centered in equity. And so to me, that just felt like something both from my own home and hearing, you know, what my husband experiences at work, and also what I experience in a town that's mostly, you know, middle class and lower, and then very wealthy. I thought it was important to talk about this because I look at it sometimes. Culture, money also plays a role in culture. And I see that power imbalance with money and socioeconomic stuff. But the thing I wanted to say was, I want not the panelists, but the, all the participants to think about what we talked about tonight and your neighborhood where you live, if it's outside of Clinton also, and think about what are those things that you want to talk about that you feel are conversations that are hard to have. Because, going forward with this, we really want to keep these conversations going. And sometimes I feel a little trapped in myself, not being able to figure out what to talk about because I don't experience these things in the same way as others do. So Sarah and I have been going back and forth with like ideas of, how to keep this conversation going. So I would love it if someone wants to email us, write to us, call us, whatever, and let us know any information or any topic or subject that is around all of this that you want to see happen. I would love it. That's my end for me.
Second that.
I agree, and it's interesting because Linda had put in a comment right as you were talking about the same thing with local governments being important, and and she talks about town boards and not being inclusive enough, and with not just in terms of color but also economically and gender identity. And that's exactly as you were talking, and how can we all continue to push forward and make our communities be more aware. And like I said, a lot of it starts with your own peer groups having those conversations and then being able to expand it. Like if you are in a position of power right now, you need to hold those who you work with accountable and start making those conversations happen so that you all can go, all right, we have learning to do. Here's where we're going to start. Here's where we're going to go. We're going to start bringing in other people as soon as we get to that point where we have pushed our own boundaries. Now we're going to expand our boundaries to include other people.
Yeah.
Before we disappear, I'm just going to share the results for everybody so that you, again, can see that you are not alone. Because again, this is incredibly important. If I'll just scroll through, read off the top, and I'll let you see. I assume someone of a different race is less capable, mostly strongly disagree. Great. I assume someone of different gender is less capable, mostly strongly disagree. I assume someone of a different color may be more dangerous. We have a lot of disagree. We do have some agree in here. I assume someone of a different gender may be more dangerous. Now we're very split on that one. When I hear a name that sounds different, I prejudge them. We have some strongly agree in there, as well as the just the agree. I stereotype people. Yeah, that's very typical of this one. When I hear of a crime, I picture the criminal as a specific race or gender. Mostly disagree and neutral. When I hear of an athletic achievement, I picture a specific gender, race. Again, pretty split, mostly on disagree, but we have some agree in there. When I hear of an academic achievement, I picture a specific race or gender. Some agree, mostly disagree, and strongly disagree. When I think of a great leader, they are a specific race, gender. Follow up to previous question, that race or gender matches my own. Mostly disagree. When I hear a story of a positive encounter from a friend or coworker, I picture the person of a specific race or gender. When I hear of a hate crime, I picture the victim as a specific race or gender. When oftentimes it seemed like this. When I hear a bad driver, I picture a specific race or gender. Pretty split. When I hear good at math, I picture a specific race or gender. Mostly in the agree. When I hear the term terrorist, I picture a specific race or gender. When I hear parent, I picture a specific race or gender. Pretty split. When I hear thug, I picture a specific race or gender. Mostly agree. When I hear teacher, I picture a specific race or gender. Interesting. When I hear scientist, I picture a specific race or gender. When I hear doctor, these ones are all very split. When I hear protester, mostly disagree. When I hear musician, when I hear activist, pretty split. And when I hear president, mostly agree. All right. So again, that is just to show everybody that you are not alone if you chose whatever you chose. They run the gamut, and it is everybody sees things differently, and sometimes people see it the same as you. So you are not alone. You are working through having any of these stereotype issues or these implicit bias. And as you continue to learn more about your implicit bias, you continue to learn more about other people, and this cultural humility really starts to sink in with you. Your answers may start to change. And it may not happen like all at once. There may be only one question that suddenly changes for you, and that's okay. One question is still incredibly important. That means you are actively engaging and changing, all right? And that is quite all right, because this is a process. We are all in a process together. Absolutely. When we know better, we do better. Linda, I said I did a letter writing campaign on behalf of HCYHY to OS town boards, asking them to explore meaningful ways to engage youth in their mission. Similar campaign can be done about including others on their boards. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Our junior high is looking for a principal, and one of the tools they're going to use to widen the pool is to ask the parents and caregivers in Clinton to fill out a survey asking them what they would like to see in a leader of the middle school. So I thought that was a pretty interesting tool. And it did have to do with gender, race, background, and all that. So it'll be interesting when that comes out for us to fill out.
Power of asking questions.
Yeah.
And I just kind of bouncing off of Linda's comment on how you can get involved, what you can do after this. You go home, you're at home, and you're thinking about everything we discussed tonight. What can you do? Well, there are so many things you can do. Like Linda said, you can join a letter writing campaign, you can engage with your PTA, you can engage with your town government. But I just want to provide two very small action items for everyone tonight. And one of them is another program that's coming up being provided by the Wallingford Public Library. And I'm going to post a link in the chat right now, but I'm also going to share this link in an email follow-up. So if you miss the link or misplace it, don't worry, we'll send it out to you. So this is a program that they are having on May 25th, and it's a virtual program on a book called Tell Me Who You Are. And we talked about it briefly during the last discussion on implicit bias. I think I just mentioned it. And it's by Winona Gao and Priya Volchi. They have also a TED Talk you can tune into and check out. But this is about sharing our stories of race, culture, and identity. And the program is welcoming to discussion and questions. So check that out, put it on your calendar. And I'm also going to share a resource for books that you might be interested in at the library. If I can share my screen, let's see. Okay. So this is just a snapshot of some new and notable titles. Can everyone see the books on their screen? Okay. Yeah. So a lot of these are popular right now or are new titles, and that's why I've included them on the list. But all of them explore different experiences that people from different cultures are having. And they may not all speak to you, but I encourage you to explore them, and whatever does speak to you, we're here at the library to help you find it as a resource. And I just also want to say thank you to everyone who participated in the program and the survey, and of course to Elijah and Abby for putting this together. And then we have a question, any children's books? I don't have a slide of children's books tonight, but I am going to follow up. We'll share some in the recap. Absolutely. And if you visit our library, which you can do, we're welcoming visitors in person. We have many collections Coralie has put together for us. You can find themed bins on different topics, and any of our staff would be happy to help you put together a bundle of books on a particular subject.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. Yeah, this makes my heart happy, as I say. And thank you, Elijah.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the work that you two put in. And thank you again, everybody, for joining, for being here, for engaging or listening. If you didn't engage, that's okay. You know, for filling out the survey and for just being a part and knowing that you want to learn. And that's all we can do is continue to learn. So thank you all.
And I think there's a saying that goes, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. So if you go out there and you give this a try and you make a mistake, then maybe, lean into it and see what happens.
Yeah.
But we will hope to see you again at our next program. Check out the PTA website, check out Elijah's website, check out the library's website. We have more things in store for everyone. So thank you. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you.